Thank you for coming. My name's Alex. Just to get started, we're going to pass around a little sign-up sheet. If you'd like information on the SAVE movement, there's a newsletter that goes out. I think it's monthly. So if you want to throw your name down in your email, there's a little book coming around. So yeah, my name's Alex. I'll give you a little quick just introduction on my background. So I left my career about a year and a half ago to work full-time in animal rights with the SAVE movement. I used to be a corporate sales director managing sales teams, and I started working. I'm from Toronto, from Canada. Ah, you want me here? Okay, no problem. So I'm from Toronto, from Canada, and I'm an organizer with the SAVE movement. Just a show of hands, who has heard of the SAVE movement before this conference? And Toronto Pig Save. I know some people don't realize that Toronto Pig Save and the SAVE movement are the same. Okay, cool. So a lot of people. I organize with the SAVE movement, and I also organize with Direct Action Everywhere. Today's talk will be focused on the SAVE movement. If anybody wants to talk about Direct Action Everywhere, I'm happy to do so after. We have a table at the end of the hall. And I've been anti-speciesist for about 5.5 years. I have a passion for photography. That's one of my pictures, and most of the pictures in the presentation are pictures I've taken. I dedicate my efforts and my talents to doing photos and videos for the SAVE movement and for Direct Action Everywhere. And right now I'm in the middle of a 3-month tour along with a friend of mine, Carol, who's here in the front. We're traveling through South America, Central America. We've already finished those, and now Europe, and we're opening up different chapters, different groups of the SAVE movement everywhere we go. And just so everyone knows, I don't know if you've seen the posters or the signs, but there will be an event hosted by the SAVE movement tomorrow morning, Monday morning. We're going to a slaughterhouse very close to here to hold a vigil, and I'll talk more about what vigils are in this presentation. But if you haven't seen the posters, they're kind of plastered around. Please join us. Transportation is provided, so we'll make sure that everyone who wants to go can go. And I'd like to start off by telling you a story. This is my best friend. This is my dad, and amazing person. He taught me, to play tennis, how to play chess when I was young. Later on in life, we golf a lot together. We play poker together with my friends. He's an amazing guy. I could talk a lot about him, but what I don't want to necessarily tell you a lot about his life, because I could talk for an hour on that. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the death of my father. So in about January 2014, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and a few months, maybe like 6 or 7 months later, I was already like making a slideshow to play like after his funeral, because pancreatic cancer, usually when it gets detected, it's a very quick end, I guess, for people. And it was probably in about July of 2014 where he ended up in the palliative care unit of the Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto. And, my mom, she spent every day, every night with my dad there. My brother and I used to go visit every single day. And I remember that there were always people coming and going, friends, family. Family flew in from Colombia, from Spain. There was always people visiting my dad while he was there. Sorry, I'll stay here. As any of you know who have had people, friends or family in the hospital, it's very normal for us to go and visit people there, It is probably the most difficult thing I've had to witness in my life, is seeing my dad kind of succumb to that horrible disease. But it makes me think that when we go there, we're not going there for us, for ourselves normally. It's very painful. I know I suffered a lot. My mother suffered a lot. All the friends and family that went, like every time they left, they were just destroyed. There were a lot of crying. But we go there for one reason, and we go there really for the person that's there. We go there because, I don't know, you don't want to be alone when you're dying, I assume. I don't think I would want to be. And I tell you this story only because it parallels exactly what we do with the Save movement. And I want to tell you about this day last year where at the Slaughterhouse, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get emotional during this talk because this is a really emotional subject, really emotional topic. But this is outside of the Slaughterhouse near Toronto where about 10,000 pigs are killed every day. It's called Vigil's Slaughterhouse. It's a very appropriate name, I think. And we're there every week. This was one specific day where a truck rolled over right outside of the slaughterhouse, making a turn. The truck tipped over. There were a lot of casualties. A lot of pigs died in that rollover. A lot were injured. Some were not injured, and they were walking around. They were out on the streets. When we heard of that in Toronto, a huge group of activists rushed to the slaughterhouse. This was on a day where we weren't having a vigil. So a lot of people rushed to the slaughterhouse. This is a picture that I took as they were pulling, the crane was pulling the truck to stand it back up. And people from sanctuaries showed up with trailers ready to take pigs to safety. And the slaughterhouse, we asked them, we begged them to give us any animals that they couldn't use. They by law in Canada, if animals are injured, if they can't walk to their own death, then they're not used. They have to be discarded. So we asked them. They refused to give us any of the pigs. In fact, I remember there was a pig on the lawn in front of the slaughterhouse that couldn't walk, and they shot the pig in the head right in front of us. And we were just begging for mercy. We were asking them to give us these animals. We would take them to a vet. We would help them. We would bring them to a sanctuary, and they refused. So I guess long story short is, even though we were trying to save these animals, we couldn't. And these are some photos from later in that day. So that happened in the morning. People stayed there the whole day, like we do, for a few hours every vigil. But in this case, we stayed there all day. We saw the trucks coming in. These are other pigs that were arriving on other trucks. And people ask me all the time, when I tell them I'm with the Save movement and we kind of talk about what we do, they ask me why we do this, like why we go to slaughterhouses, why we subject ourselves to all this suffering, like what's the point? You can't save these animals. And in a way, I agree with them that we can't save these specific animals. I mean, we couldn't even save the animals that were garbage to that industry. They still wouldn't give them to us. So I understand why people say that and why they question, going to these vigils. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we do this. These are just some photos from later that evening. We held a special vigil that night for the pigs that had died in the crash. And when we were there, we knew that the pigs that were on those trucks, I mean, every week when we go, we see those pigs and we know that they're going to die. But I think the same way that I knew that my father was going to die, and all our friends and family knew that my father was going to die, the very least that they could do, even though they couldn't save him, was not to ignore him. Was to go there and be with him. And that's really the main principle behind bearing witness and behind the vigils that we do. So with that, I just want to give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about. So we'll start with just the history of the Save movement, Toronto Pig Save, and how that led to an international movement. We'll talk about bearing witness, so the kind of the philosophy behind it, and also the practical reasons and the strategic reasons why we do that in our fight for animal liberation. And we'll talk about love-based community organizing as well. So this is a photo of the slaughterhouse that used to be very, very close to Toronto. It doesn't exist now, which is, I guess, a good thing. But you can see the skyline of Toronto in the back there. So this is maybe about 10 minutes from the downtown core in Toronto. And this is where Toronto Pig Save was born. This is Anita, and that's the co-founder. So Toronto Pig Save was co-founded by Anita and by her dog, Mr. Bean. So if you ever hear of Anita and it says, if you ever see her name and it says co-founder, this is the other co-founder. It's Mr. Bean. And the reason why they're co-founders is because the way that the Save movement started and Toronto Pig Save started was Anita used to walk Mr. Bean down a very busy street called Lakeshore in Toronto, which is a main artery into the downtown core. And there were trucks, these trucks that would arrive to get to that slaughterhouse that I showed you, and they would have to stop to make a turn. And Anita had time to see these pigs in the truck. This was the first time that she ever really got close to pigs on a truck. And right away, obviously, she made the connection. She didn't understand why, we treated pigs that way, but Mr. Bean was loved and respected by everybody. So she started doing vigils. She would see people started joining her on there was a little island right there. So that's the main street. It's 3 lanes each way, but there's a little island in the middle, and this is the left turn lane here where the trucks would come and turn. So they would wait on what was called Pig Island, and Pig Island actually became fairly popular in Toronto. It was written about in the newspapers and in the news. So that was Pig Island, and there were always people there. Anita decided that she made a promise to the first pigs in the first truck that she ever bore witness to, that she would be there every week, 3 times a week. And Anita kept that promise. She went and she had vigils by herself at times. Eventually people started joining her. There were a few people on Pig Island. And, this was back in 2011. So if you think about how long it's been, and then we added different slaughterhouses, there have been over 1,000 vigils in Toronto alone. And Anita's been at most of those. So just an idea of the dedication and the resolve that Anita had to help and to bear witness to what was happening to these animals. And this is a recent picture from a vigil. It doesn't even really capture how many people were there, but we now have vigils in Toronto where we can have several hundred people showing up for a vigil. I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what a vigil is. One thing that we also do, we try to take advantage of the vigils because the slaughterhouses are, most of them are right in the city. There's a lot of traffic that goes by as we're standing there and waiting for the trucks. So obviously you saw the signs that we hold. And we also take the opportunity to give out literature, flyers to cars as they pass by. This is a chicken on one of the trucks at the chicken slaughterhouse. And I'll just tell you a quick story about the chicken slaughterhouse. So there's a slaughterhouse here. This is in kind of the northwest part of the city, but I mean it's right in the city. And that's Metro. That's a big grocery store chain. It is right beside. So there's a slaughterhouse and a Metro. And I remember talking to the manager once inside of Metro, and she was saying that some days when the wind blows, like the feathers from the birds will actually blow into the store. And so the Metro is obviously not happy that there's a slaughterhouse next door, but it's just very, very odd that there's a slaughterhouse next to a grocery store. But what we find is that a lot of slaughterhouses tend to be in populated urban areas, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. These are Neo and Mufius, 2 rescues that we did with the Save Movement and with Direct Action Everywhere. I'll talk a little bit more about rescues, but just remember these guys when we talk about that. So what do we do with the Save Movement? We bear witness at weekly and all-day vigils. We do vegan outreach, so we go on the streets. We have VR headsets. I don't know if you guys have seen them, but if anybody has never tried them, I would strongly recommend it. It is a very unique experience, and it's probably the closest that you can get to bearing witness without actually being there. We go to grocery stores, schools. We had a door-to-door campaign last summer, which was very successful. We use social and mass media to expose this industry. We do rescues, like I told you about Neo and Mufius. Right now we're traveling, and we really have a strong emphasis on facilitating and helping anybody that wants to be an organizer, that wants to open a chapter. We help them do that. We have resources and people that we can partner you with to help. So if anybody does want to start a Save Movement chapter, if you don't have one in your city, definitely talk to us. building the organization. So we have meetings, we have a handbook, we have activity reports. I'm going to show you a couple of interesting facts about the Save movement right now. And we also have Climate Vegan. Climate Vegan is part of the Save movement, but it's really focused on the environmental impact of animal agriculture. So we'll go to different events that are climate focused and represent, of course, the kind of vegan perspective. So this is a graph just showing the growth of the Save movement. In 2010 was when it was actually founded, but the first vigil officially happened in 2011. And what has been mind-blowing is how quickly it's grown in the past 2 years. So when this presentation was actually made, the 230 number was actually right down to about 149. And it's just like groups are starting almost every day now. It's really amazing how quickly the movement's growing. Who here has heard of Anita's trial, the pig trial? Wow, a lot of people. So I'm assuming most of you are not from Toronto. So that shows that the power of getting into the mass media and just the I don't know, the story, the compassion that when you do the right thing and when somebody tries to persecute or prosecute you for doing the right thing, how people respond. So yeah, it's all over the world now. I'm going to show you a little video just to give you an idea if you've never seen what a vigil looks like. This video is from this tour. So this video I'm going to show you is in Costa Rica, just outside of San Jose. And it really speaks for itself. Just as a warning, if anybody's affected by images of animals on the trucks, that's as graphic as it's going to get. We have been inside of slaughterhouses and on kill floors on this trip. This is not in this video. So this is just a typical vigil outside of a slaughterhouse. Anita follows and reads a lot of Tolstoy. She reads a lot. But this is a very special quote, and this is the quote that the Save movement is really based around. And so when people ask me, you know, why we go to this and why we suffer, this is a very good quote. When the suffering of another creature causes you to feel pain, do not submit to the initial desire to flee from the suffering one, but on the contrary, come closer, as close as you can, to him who suffers and try to help him. And I hear it, I've said this, but I hear it all the time. People ask me, like, you know, they say, you know, I don't need to go. I don't need to go to vigils. I'm already vegan. I can't stress enough, you know, we don't go there for us. We don't go there to become aware. We know exactly what's going on. We go there for them, so that the main reason is really to just not ignore the suffering of these individuals. And when you see that video, you know, and that video doesn't even really communicate what it's like to be there, because, you know, when I watch that video, I obviously get emotional because I remember each of those individuals. You know, they each have different personalities. Like, some of them are like, the hardest is when, like, animals are just, like, completely defeated. You know, some animals, they'll come up to you and they have, like, this, I don't know why they have some, like, hope. Maybe we're going to save them. You know, they'll take water from us. And other animals, like you saw, they're just like, they're done. You know, when we talk about numbers, there's so many, just the numbers are incomprehensible. We can't connect with animals and with individuals on that scale. We need to be there to show those individual stories. So that's why we do it. Another Tolstoy quote, "A person knows the life of other beings only through observation, and only so does she know of their existence. She knows of the life of other beings only when she wishes to think of it." This is really important. We know, at least I believe, that people are good. You know, people don't support this industry because they're bad people. They just don't know and they don't want to think of it. This is, bearing witness is one opportunity that we have to expose part of this industry, you know, where we do have access, because we don't have access typically to the farms, to the factory farms, and we don't have access inside the slaughterhouses, again, normally. So the transportation is a part where we can actually connect and show their stories. Just a few statistics on the Save movement. So when this presentation was made, you can see how many groups, how many slaughterhouses are on the bottom, and these are the number of groups that support those slaughterhouses, that go to them and hold vigils there, I should say. So 38 groups at the time just did vigils at one slaughterhouse, about 13 at 2 slaughterhouses, and so on. So there's some groups in Toronto, for example. We have 4 slaughterhouses that we regularly attend vigils. We just they're happening to be close enough where it's feasible. And other places where a slaughterhouse, like for example here, the vigil that we're doing, the slaughterhouse is about 45 minutes to an hour away. So that seems to be the closest one from the research that friends of ours here were able to find. So we would probably, if there's a group that starts here, and we're hoping that a group does start here in Vienna, it would be probably the one slaughterhouse. How often groups go? So monthly tends to be the most popular, where there's a vigil once a month. Twice a month would be about 5 groups, it looks like. 3 a month. Weekly is in the cities where there are larger groups, like Toronto, Los Angeles. There's different cities where there's a good enough base where they can actually have weekly vigils. And then 2 per week. So for example, at Toronto, there's 3 per week. There's one at the one at the pig slaughterhouse, one at the cow slaughterhouse, and one at the chicken slaughterhouse every single week. How long vigils last? Typical vigils are they're scheduled normally for 2 hours. They tend to always go longer because people they're there and they want to stay longer, but they're usually scheduled for 2 hours. Some groups do longer vigils when they organize. If they do once a month, then they might do a longer vigil. And there are also all-day vigils, which I'll talk about in a second. But these are the kind of the regular weekly vigils. How many people go to vigils really depends on the city and how big the group is. So the most popular are actually fairly small groups. And for anyone that is going to vigils, that wants to start a group, or that, there is a group that's going to be starting here in Austria in Graz, it'll start off small. It'll be within the 1 to 10. And I always tell people not to be discouraged. If you do start a group and it's just you going, or there's 2 or 3 people, if you think about Anita's story, it took years to build this global movement to the point where it is now. And it was through that example of kind of self, I guess, of sacrifice, I guess, of going every, 3 times a week for years. So this is just an ad, I guess, for an all-day vigil. Our typical all-day vigils start at the pig slaughterhouse, because it's the furthest away, and trucks arrive in the morning. So we'll usually start there about 7 or 8 in the morning. We'll go to about 11, then we'll move to the cow slaughterhouse, which is back in the city. So the pig slaughterhouse is about 40 minutes away from downtown. We'll come back to Toronto. We'll go to the cows. We'll have lunch. We typically have speakers and special guests. So this is something that has really helped grow the movement in Toronto, is that we'll take advantage of the fact that people are gathering, and we'll have special guests show up and deliver talks, speeches, musical performances sometimes as well. So we've had Badass Vegan, John Lewis. We've had one vigil that was like the bodybuilders showed up, all the, the big strong guys. They talked about their experiences. We've had Bite Size Vegan. We've had, I know in LA they've had Moby has shown up, Kat Von D, Joaquin Phoenix, Sean Monson, who did Earthlings. He's been to Toronto. He's been to LA. He's very interested in this. He's actually covering the Save movement in his next project called Earthlings Anthology. Has anybody heard of that coming out? Earthlings Anthology? No? Yeah, a few people. So just keep an eye out for that. It's going to be excellent. I learned this from Anita, and I fully believe it. So Anita always talks about bearing witness as a duty. And it's something that she strongly believes, and I strongly believe that we all should be doing. When we talk about, there's a environmental philosopher named Kristen Schrader-Frochette, and she emphasizes a few points. So she emphasizes the responsibility through ability, that those individuals who are able to talk about and to fight for change have a responsibility to do so. The responsibility through complicity. So those of us who lived in advanced, kind of industrialized countries, because of our, I guess, disproportionate use of resources, we kind of have an added responsibility to speak up and to try and drive positive changes. Professional obligations. So those of us who are more informed or have the skills or the resources to speak on these issues and to drive change, and we also have a social obligation to do so. And the greater the catastrophe, so the greater the duty to organize and prevent the catastrophe. She was talking about environmental issues and environmental catastrophes, but of course we know, how big this catastrophe is, so I think it applies as well. Bearing witness as a method. So what's unique, I think, about what's unique about the Save movement is that it really provides a first-hand animal viewpoint experience to people. You actually get to be there to see, to connect with the individual victims and to share their stories. It's simple and accessible. It's another thing, I think another reason why the Save movement has grown so quickly is that it doesn't take much effort, much time even, to organize this. It's accessible to everyone. If parents want to bring children, which they have, all the way to 80 or 90-year-olds, anybody can do this, which is not necessarily true for other forms of activism. So this is just extremely, extremely accessible and community action. So it invites members of that local community to go to their, the local slaughterhouse. And just a little side note on that. Another reason why it's important, I think, that everyone do this in their city is that I can't tell you how many times when we're traveling and we get to a place and we're doing outreach and we're talking to people, let's say on the street, and we talk about animal cruelty, or we show them a VR video, they say, yeah, that happens in other places, but not here. You know, here we treat animals properly, or we treat them with respect. And so when we are able to show them photos and videos of the slaughterhouse that is, you know, half an hour away from here, it really, I think, helps them make that connection that this is happening here as well. And regular vigils are key. I think, you know, Anita's demonstrated that, and the reason why this movement has grown is because people see the dedication that people have to going regularly and visiting these animals and bearing witness. If you're familiar with the SAVE movement, like most of you are, you've probably seen videos about us stopping trucks. And just a little note on that, when we first started, it was a little bit more challenging because you know, people didn't know why we were there, and the truckers, they weren't necessarily happy to stop for us. But in Toronto, now, because we've been doing this for a few years, and we are a very love-based, a very respectful group of people. When we go to slaughterhouses, we encourage people not to, you know, say, you know, not to fight, not to yell at the people that work there, not to, you know, we encourage them to treat them with the same respect we would want to be treated with. Same thing goes for the drivers. We treat them with a lot of respect. And over the years, we've managed to develop relationships with these slaughterhouses in Toronto, where the managers and the management have worked out an agreement where the trucks now stop for us. So we don't have to actually physically block the trucks much anymore. The trucks, when we're there, will stop and allow us to bear witness for several minutes, which is amazing. This just before I left on this tour, the toughest slaughterhouse, which was the pig one, Viermen's, where the rollover happened, they just agreed to have the truck stop. So I haven't checked in, and I hope that's still continuing, but they actually said that they're going to tell all their drivers to stop for us, because there were some points where they were like trying to run us, not trying to run us over, but they weren't stopping. We were standing there, we had to jump out of the way. So, yeah. And if you do start a group and you want advice and tips on how to do this safely, I'm very big on safety when we're at vigils. Please talk to us. We can give you advice, and we have lots of other people that can really help you start a group and share our experiences. So yeah, this is at Viermen's. This is what a typical vigil used to look like. Again, I think it's really important to emphasize that we are love-based, and we are very respectful. We are there for one reason: the animals. We view the truck drivers, we view the slaughterhouse workers as victims of this system. We're not against them at all. And I think because of that attitude, we've managed to get a lot of support, both public support and police support as well. So there have been times where the police have actually helped us stop the trucks, which I think speaks a lot about, you know, we're there. You know, people say protesting. We call it vigils because it's so focused on the animals. But police have noticed that and have actually helped us. Actually, yeah, sorry. I was going to tell a story, but I don't think we have time. Cesar Chavez answered a question about how to organize. I think this is great. First, you talk to one person, then you talk to another person, then you talk to another person. A good organizer has to work hard and long. There are no shortcuts. You just keep talking to people, working with them, sharing, exchanging, and they come along. And it seems so simple, but that's kind of the basis to any grassroots organization or grassroots movement, is you just talk to people. And so we're happy to talk to anybody if you have any questions at the end of the chat if we have time for questions, but of course at the booth as well. A picture from Toronto. That's a very busy intersection, about a block, 2 blocks maybe, from where the actual slaughterhouses are. So we spend time doing outreach as well, educating people, showing people that there's a slaughterhouse there. You'd be surprised how many people don't know that there's a slaughterhouse like in the city or in their neighborhood. So it's another thing is again, helping people connect that this horrible stuff is happening like in our neighborhoods, in our cities. Climate vegan, I mentioned it. Just a quick note. I love those banner drops. So banner drops are really cool. They'll go over bridges, over highways, and kind of send some vegan-friendly messages. But yeah, obviously we're focusing on the environmental impact and going to, you know, Earth Day or climate marches and representing this necessary, I think, component to that conversation. And this is a picture of some, is that Mary Chris? Yeah, Mary Chris. So Mary Chris on the left in the carrot suit. She is amazing. She started, I believe she started the Save Outreach Squad, but she, every Tuesday morning, yes? Every Tuesday morning at Kiel and St. Clair, so at that intersection where you saw everyone holding the signs, she has been there like for, I don't know how long, for years, just, and usually by herself. Like now I think people are joining her, but she's been there every single, rain or snow or shine, like she's always there with signs, with information. She is the most positive person, I think one of the most positive people I've ever met in the movement, and she genuinely connects with people, and people know her, like people in that neighborhood and people that drive by know her. And you know, I think going back to the having regular vigils and regular events like this, like being there all the time, people really understand how important this issue is, the resolve that we have, and they respect it. I can't tell you, like the reactions that we get today compared to even a few years ago in Toronto are very different. Like the support that we get from cars driving by, like, you know, like friendly honks, peace signs, thumbs up, whereas like 3-4 years ago, even in Toronto, it was a lot of middle fingers and a lot of like bacon and, you know, get a job comments. Those still happen, but it's very different now. It's a lot more support. And I'm sure that these people are not necessarily all vegans. There's no way like that many people driving by, but they understand why we're doing it, and at some level they support it, which is, I think, really nice. And that's all I have. But I'm happy to take questions.